Tonight we're going to be reviewing guide rods. Really big guide rods. The Glockstore pure tungsten guide rod for the Gen 4, Gen 5 Glocks. Are you ready? Stand by. So pretty much everybody who markets something to competition shooters claim that it's going to make your gun reduce felt recoil. So when the Glockstore offered a new guide rod, the pure tungsten guide rod, I was curious to see if it was going to be an improvement over the other double diamond extended guide rod, which I've already done a review on. So a bunch of the products that claim to reduce recoil don't really, but when a product actually does what it says it's going to do in this arena, it's pretty noteworthy. So all the information I'm about to share with you is pertinent only to the Glock 34 Gen 5 guide rod that they're going to have on the website. Since the guide rods are slide length, the 34 guide rod is going to weigh a little bit more than the 17 guide rod, although it's going to have the same general effect on the 17 as it does the 34. The guide rod is offered in an uncaptured version for the 34 and is going to be offered in both a captured and uncaptured version for the 17s. Now before we go any further, let's talk about why the guide rod is supposed to work and why people always talk about this. By adding a heavier guide rod, you're adding non-reciprocating mass to the gun, which means there is a dead weight counteracting the muzzle climb that's going to come from the cartridge. At least that's what's supposed to happen in theory. So people have been saying that for years about stainless steel guide rods, but the problem with that is most stainless steel guide rods weigh marginally more than the OEM guide rods that actually come in the gun. But when you go to a denser metal like tungsten, you can add considerable mass. Now to talk about specifics, the OEM recoil assembly on the Gen 5s weigh about 0.7 ounces. The original double diamond extended tungsten guide rods weigh about 2 ounces, which was a significant increase over stock. The new pure tungsten guide rod weighs 3.7 ounces. Now for those of you who aren't mathletes, that's roughly 6 times the weight of the OEM assembly. The advantages of a heavier gun are going to include recovering from recoil faster and holding steadier on longer distance shooting to execute more precise shots. As it's difficult to put something like precision on film for you, I can take high-speed video of the guns and recoil. So let's look at some build drills of the OEM spring assembly and then the pure tungsten assembly. So first look at all the muzzle movement on the OEM as the gun recoils. And then look at the pure tungsten as it recoils. Now one thing you have to account for when you're doing this high-speed video is the spring rate on the guide rod, because something with a lighter spring rate is not going to dip as much as the slide closes. So the spring rate I actually tested with this guide rod was 17 pounds, which is similar to what the OEM springs are. So it's pretty evident to me that the gun was not moving around as much with the pure tungsten guide rod. Now the things that I couldn't capture on the video is that the guide rod does change the balance of the gun. It becomes noticeably more muzzle heavy. If you've held an SP01, you'll know what I'm talking about with just a heavy dust covered gun. It begins to feel and point more like that. Now I did find that it was easier to hold a steady bead on a target at 50 or even 75 yards with the added weight in the muzzle of the gun. Now one thing I wasn't counting on was that the dot actually comes out of recoil better with the heavier guide rod. So when you are shooting at kind of the limit of your performance, it's easier to track what the dot is doing, if not even holding it on target. It was much easier for me to hold the A zone when I was shooting build drills. And since the balance of the gun had changed so much, I kind of got to thinking, what if I used a brass base pad to balance it out? So with the brass base pad, it makes the gun balance again, and this adds about 3 ounces to the base of the gun. And it is honestly ridiculous to shoot. It makes the gun behave much more like a SP01 with a lower bore axis, which is kind of the best of both worlds at that point. And I know the argument is, why would you shoot a lightweight gun and take away the lightweight advantage? Well, more weight is better kind of to a point, and that's going to be different for every shooter. I like guns that are about 34 to 35 ounces, and between the guide rod and this brass base plate, it puts me right in the middle of that ballpark, which is where I'd want to be. And the brass base plates are also available at Glockstore. Now my reason for using the brass base plates isn't honestly related to recoil and recovery. It was more about having them drop free on classifiers and stages that really mattered on jamming reloads, but that's a topic for another video. While the pure tungsten guide rod is awesome, it's not going to be for every game. For instance, if you're shooting IDPA, you're still going to have to use a steel guide rod. You're not allowed to use tungsten in your guns. But I would still honestly recommend getting an uncaptured steel guide rod just so you can change the spring rate in your gun. That's valuable if you load your own ammunition. Now, the divisions that can use the pure tungsten guide rod, that's really going to be Carry Optics and USPSA. And if you're a 3-gunner who competes with a 34, it might be a good addition for your gun as well. And if you're using a Glock 22 or 35 in limited division, this guide rod is really going to make your job easier with the 40 caliber. So as far as cost goes, it's probably the only negative I can report. These things are expensive. If you've looked at what tungsten sells for, it's just a more expensive metal than is steel. So a steel guide rod is going to run you about 40 bucks regardless of what platform. The 2-ounce double diamond extended guide rod for 34s is about $60. And the pure tungsten guide rod is actually about twice that. And if you think about it, metal's usually sold by weight and it is about twice as heavy. So it kind of makes sense that it tracks that way. And on other platforms that have tungsten guide rods, they're all selling for over $100. That seems to be the market for what one of these would go for. So all in all, the pure tungsten guide rod definitely does what it says it's supposed to do, and I was honestly amazed at how much more of an impact that it made. That's what I've got for you guys. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. A big thanks to Glockstore for sending the pure tungsten guide rod for testing and evaluation. And if you've made it this far, I do have a discount code for the pure tungsten guide rod down in the description of the video. So check that out so that can save you a bit of money. As always, I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.